But we do see a line of local police officers with their riot gear. We did hear at that press conference that 197 arrests, at least, have been made today. Mayor Bass says that she does not know how long the ICE raids will continue for. She, of course, is continuing to urge the White House to stop with the raids. Officials in Los Angeles have said that that's what they believe it'll take to quell this activity. There's been about 5 streets in downtown LA that these protests have been limited to, according to the mayor. Let's get out to Fox 11 Los Angeles. They're live on air right now. In fact, they're doing a report out in the field. Let's get a little more context from them.
What I saw earlier are pretty close to being back to their cars. But these are other people who've been staying in downtown later in the night, and that's when we've had some of the problems that we've been recording for you here on Fox 11. But right now, you can see a concerted effort by the LAPD to get people out of the area and to get them to safety and to impose that curfew until things settle down in the city of LA. Laura Diaz reporting live from downtown, sending it back to the studio.
Laura, you can see with all this movement that LAPD is taking this very seriously. Of course they are. And moving into place to make sure that the protesters and all the people downtown that don't belong there need to move along. Now, the mayor also made a point, I think it was actually Chief McDonald who made the point, that if you are experiencing homelessness, that you are allowed to stay in the curfew zone, and if you are a member of the news media. Now, I'm wondering, because I saw a couple of times on other news channels where the reporter had to keep explaining, no, we're press, we're press. Have you had any kind of interaction like that? Was there any time, a point where they weren't quite hearing you when you said, I work for Fox 11 News?
No, I've had no problems. They've been very even-handed with us. We've been allowed to record the news as we always do. I mean, last night when things got really hairy, they were moving us out for our own safety. But other than that, people have been respectful. They honor the profession and they allow us to do our work. But right now, as you can see right at this corner of Temple and Los Angeles Street, we have some people who are slow to leave, and others, I'm going to presume they were the ones who were at that prayer vigil earlier, and, you know, they're law-abiding. They wanted to do the right thing, so they've left the area. So I think the people who are still here had nothing to do with that event that we were covering at the park. I think this is a different group.
Yeah. Laura,
they showed up here because they saw activity.
Yeah, we should note the picture on the left box is that overpass of the 101 that we saw that was taken over by the crowd. They were throwing the rocks onto the CHP vehicles below. Law enforcement well in control of that overpass, well in control of that access to the 101 freeway or not.
That is the 101 freeway. I don't think that is near the 101 freeway. I think that's closer to the federal building. You're talking about the larger screen?
No, the smaller box.
The smaller box.
Not that shot there. Not that one, the one we had before.
Okay. Well, they were blocking an entryway to the 101 freeway, so I beg your pardon.
No worries, no worries.
But on the other side is the LA Mall. So anyone who's been downtown and you know the LA Mall, that is subterranean, and it is near City Hall East and near the court system, et cetera. That's where sometimes people go to have lunch if you're on jury duty or what have you. But I find it really remarkable that we're seeing the policemen, the police officers there, and they already have their less than lethal rifles drawn. And so they mean business. They're going to make
Well, think about it. Anybody here who's not moving is not wanting to be part of the acknowledgement of that curfew. Anybody else who is well aware of it and doesn't want to be caught up in it is probably, like Laura said, in their car making their way out, and LAPD will accommodate that. But quite a show there where you have those equestrian units, quite a show of police vehicles. But it sounded like the mayor was very serious at her news conference today. The police chief, very serious. They were not going to take another night of lawlessness in this downtown area.
It was one thing when there was the graffiti. That was very sad for the mayor because, of course, she wants this city to shine when we are hosting these big events upcoming, the Olympics, the World Cup. But after 23 businesses were damaged and looted, that was just the line in the sand. We cannot have this happen again. We cannot have another night of that. And when you have so many people converge on a small area, there's only so much police can do. Okay, police on the move now, pushing along. A few people, there aren't that many people. And by the way, we love the mounted units only because we love horses, but the horses are very persuasive. You might be able to go toe-to-toe with an officer with a riot stick, but it's a lot harder when you've got a 2,000-pound beast, or however. Yeah. Christina Gonzalez would know better than I how much a horse weighs.
Let's go back to Laura Diaz, if we can. They're on the ground. Laura, you are outside the federal building, where it seems to me that police are tightening up that area right now, really trying to take control of that area with a clear sign to those people that you see backing up right now.
Yeah, you can see that there's a scrimmage line that's been formed on the other side. When we had the camera whipped around before and we were showing you the mounted unit, that's the other side. So they're now walking toward us, and I presume they're trying to get the last. Okay, they want us to move. We got to move.
All right, we'll take it back here. Obviously, Laura, a member of the media as well, but when the police come in like this and they are clearing the area, that means us as well.
Yeah.
It is.
They'll start directing you to an area that you need to go. If they don't want you there, we have a right to be there as members of the media, but they can tell you, instead of here, please go over there.
And again, that is the area where we saw the National Guard there and Homeland Security there. Obviously, the LAPD wanting to make a statement about that specific area to start, for sure. That's where our camera is, and we are seeing overhead. But they're really wanting to make a statement, Susan, about that area with the federal building, and perhaps that is a sign that they want no damage in that area, nobody being unruly in that area, and making a stand right there.
Well, particularly because a lot of what we see, a lot of the optics, especially around the federal building, that informs what kinds of sentiment we're getting out of the president or Speaker Johnson, or, you know, anyone that is justifying the orders that ICE and Border Patrol, whatever, have issued, or specifically the Trump administration, in terms of like fortifying law enforcement around federal buildings.
So it happened around 6 o'clock, give or take, right before 6 o'clock, that the mayor's news conference happened. LA Mayor Karen Bass declaring a local emergency with that curfew for tonight. And a reminder to anybody who's watching from other parts of the country, who is watching from other parts of the world, other cities, if you do know LA or you don't know LA, it's a pretty small area that they have this curfew. Everybody else can go about their business. If you're in Santa Monica, you're in Whittier, you're in Anaheim, you're in Burbank, Newport, you're living your life necessarily. Right. This right here, it borders this downtown pocket of the 5 freeway, the 110, the 10, and where the 110 and 5 merge. So it is just a pocket of downtown LA in which they're saying, not tonight, people.
And really, when you think about it, what areas were affected by the protest is even much smaller than that. It's much smaller than when we see the map of the curfew zone, which extends all the way north past Chinatown. We didn't really see very much in the way of Chinatown. The closest we came was that reckless driver that drove. That guy got out of there as well. So you see the borders, you see how it's all bordered by freeways, and that was on purpose. The mayor said that's the way Los Angeles sees the areas around Southern California, bordered by freeways. And so, you know, the 110 slot between the 101 and the 5. So you know that's closed. You know that the Interstate 5 down to the 10, that is the border. That's the eastern border that is closing off that zone. But it's a huge, she says it's a 1 square mile, but it looks really big. And if you then consider, if we were able to zoom into exactly where the protests have been, it's a smaller portion still of this of this, where the curfew zone is?
Well, bottom line, we saw some lawlessness last night, destruction of businesses. You've seen all of the graffiti that's been left behind. If I'm in business in that area, I may be welcoming the curfew just to bring some calm, but also that means a loss of business. And for people who don't know downtown LA, it's really been built up over the years.
Absolutely.
With wonderful restaurants and hotels and crypto.com.
It's an entertainment zone now, whereas 10 years ago or so, it wasn't so big as it is now.
Right.
You got crypto.com, LA Live. Not LA Live now. That's this.
It's one of those locations that, you know, you go on a Friday night to go out to dinner or to an event downtown. There's the garment.
The BET Awards were downtown yesterday.
City Hall, your LAPD headquarters. Your heart of government is right there. But for the most part, if you're living in anywhere else, any other spots of Los Angeles, you're not directly affected by this. You're not under a curfew if you're in Woodland Hills or Calabasas or Irvine or Marina del Rey.
And I guarantee you, everyone that lives in the city of Los Angeles or even nearby the city of Los Angeles, they've gotten text messages from people from across the country going, "Are you okay?"
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And when in fact it's like, I mean, just today I got a text message who says, "How's your neighborhood?" And I go, very far away from this area that's impacted by the protests. Don't worry. It's just not, I mean, the world sees it as a whole area, this whole city of LA, when it's not.
But that's true with any breaking news, and you see something happening in Dallas. Do you reach out to your friends in Dallas? I often do. How are you doing? Checking on you, because not only does it maybe not affect you physically, it might affect you emotionally, and people know that we work in the business, so they probably assume you and I are coming to work, you and I are in the midst of this, you and I are dealing with this, and you and I can provide information. But I'm wondering, to our viewers, if you also have gotten a message from family or friends who they live away from LA, they live in another location, and they want to check on you, because emotionally, this affects all of us, because we're all watching. We know the ICE operations are not over. And for families that are being directly affected by the ICE operations, it's a very painful time. But on a greater issue, we're looking at this politically. We're looking at this with our local government and our national government. And it affects us in LA, but it also affects the nation.
Absolutely. It's, in fact, the mayor called it an experiment, that she said that she believes that this is the Trump administration's experiment. If we can take the second largest city and take control of it, the second largest city in the nation, then we can do it elsewhere. So that was her assertion. We don't know if there is any credibility to that opinion, but she believes that it is some kind of experiment. Of course, we know that there's no love lost between the governor and the president, so perhaps that's why there's such an aggressive, or seemingly an aggressive, actions by ICE. We do know that there have been raids today in various locations around Southern California. So despite the protestations, despite the demonstrations and the protests, it's not stopping ICE. Excuse me. It's not stopping ICE from doing what they came here to do, which is to round up undocumented. Now, you can take issue with the way they're doing it, because apparently what's getting caught up are not just people that are violent criminals with police records, but also people that are just trying to work and feed their family.
Well, as we are watching this here, obviously the LAPD there is very prepared to deal with this crowd here. And some are going to say they're press, and in this day and age where there's so much social media press, I'm wondering who gets to stay, who doesn't get to stay. It seems everybody with a cell phone seems to be a commentator, seems to be press. I'm sure that you have to have some kind of credential to consider yourself press and to stay.
Christine, we're going to move on. We're going to find out what Ed Lascos is up to because there's more reaction to ongoing ICE raids in other places, protests and now military moving into Southern California. Some Orange County leaders are opposed to President Trump's order to send in more National Guard troops, and they have a message to local and federal law enforcement. Let's go live to Fox 11's Ed Lascos. He's in Santa Ana in Orange County with the latest there, and we saw what happened last night, Ed. Is there a curfew down there?
No curfew down here at all, Susan, but let's get right into it. Joe will give you a look. That is just some vehicles moving in from Homeland Security, some of the immigration officers, and what you have then is a long line of the National Guard members cutting a gauntlet through the protesters to escort those vehicles out. But we're right here in the Civic Center Plaza where all of this exploded last night, as you were saying, Susan. A lot of remnants all over Santa Ana Boulevard here of some of the rubber bullets and other projectiles that all happened. You can see some of the roadways. Joe gives you a look, all marked up here. This is where they had the tear gas flying last night when the protests, some 200 strong, couple hundred strong, protested, and as nightfall came, it erupted into violence and the face-to-face confrontation with law enforcement. That's a long line there of, if you can see them, Santa Ana police and some of the National Guard members escorting some of those vehicles right across the path of the protesters down there as they're lined up. Several dozen protesters in this area right in front of the federal building here of the Civic Center Plaza. That's over to the right-hand side. Joe will give you a look at that. And all you have in front of the federal building, as you can imagine is National Guard members, and they're protecting this building, the Immigration Center. It's just down the block from the Ronald Reagan Federal Courthouse, another target of the protesters last night where all of this unfolded. Talking about what happened last night, let's get to that video. Wild scene here. They had arrests, dozens of arrests after a face-to-face confrontation. The tear gas in the air, the rubber bullets, the fireworks being thrown, as we're told, and other projectiles from the demonstrators at the line of police. All of this as that protest unwinded through the day, and then as the evening came, it just erupted into violence, so much so there was a press conference here a little while ago, a couple of hours ago, actually, law enforcement, but also the local lawmakers, county supervisors, saying if you want this violence to end, and we all do, as one of the supervisors was saying, the best way to have it end is to take all the military, all the National Guard members, all the U.S. Marines, and we haven't seen any Marines deployed in this area yet, but the supervisor saying get the military out of Santa Ana. Listen to some of this.
This morning we heard from our district attorney, and we agree that law enforcement needs to show the same restraint that we are asking of the public. We don't want to see any excessive force or civil rights violations by our law enforcement agency at any level. To the federal administration, we demand that you take your militarized equipment and troops and stop occupying our communities immediately.
Now you're looking live. Cheers at that press conference, and jeers here from a lot of the protesters as some of the ICE vehicles move through that line, escorted by the National Guard members. But it has been peaceful. It has been quiet here at this location, despite what happened last night. But the concern right through the city is that all of this could explode quickly, as it did 24 hours ago. There's another location, if you're familiar with the city, Bristol and McFadden. That's a major intersection here in Santa Ana, in the heart of Santa Ana. There was a large crowd. We're told an even larger crowd than what we're seeing down here, gathering at that location. And I know they had some of the police deployment here, a SWAT team, also another tactical team, and they hightailed it out of here about 10 minutes ago, presumably going over to that location. The police bird in the air also has been flying around back and forth with its night sun. So they're watching that situation, that location, also keeping a close eye on this location, as this is where all the trouble really hit last night. But right at this hour, Christine and Susan, it is relatively quiet here in Santa Ana, but you can certainly feel the tension as everybody realizes, geez, we saw what happened last night. We don't want that to happen again here tonight.
Yeah, and we should note that we were there live last night in Santa Ana, bringing our viewers some of this coverage. This is Orange County versus LA County, but Santa Ana is a heavily Latino population and Asian population as well. But they did have some ICE operations there a day or so ago, and that did affect the community who was reacting to the ICE operations in their locations, and also some neighboring communities as well.
And what is confounding to me is what is the turning point? Like, what turned the crowd? So in the beginning, when we were down there, we saw, yes, a lot of people and a couple of skirmish lines, but then something happened, and it's what we saw in Little Tokyo last night as well. Like, you know, we can't quite figure out what is the trigger, what turns the crowd from a peaceful protest situation to something uglier.
It seems to be, you know, in watching this the last several nights, what we're talking like 5 nights now since it all started Friday, and I've been down in downtown LA, first time here in Santa Ana, but it always seems to be the crowd. It's always tension in the air, certainly when they're face-to-face with law enforcement, face-to-face with the skirmish lines, and then you usually have one person or so who's the igniter, my opinion, and that's, I was thinking something what former LAPD Chief Bill Bratton used to call them, the knuckleheads, and it was just usually, I would watch it, there'd be one person who would excite the violence, light the fuse, if you will, by throwing a fireworks or something, or a bottle of water or something at the law enforcement, and then all of a sudden it would be on. They'd be on, they'd be clashing, they'd be jousting back and forth, and then the officers, particularly here last night, they were not, if you don't mind me saying, they were not fooling around with the tear gas and everything else. They really moved in quick, trying to put down the violence, trying to protect the federal area through here. And as the lawmakers were saying at that press conference earlier today down here in Santa Ana, in the OC, they deplore this violence. They don't want any part of this violence. Sure, they're aiming. It's interesting. Their point is also what we heard up from Mayor Bass, and what we've been hearing from her, that they're blaming the president and the immigration crackdown for this. Blame some of the lawmakers here squarely on the president and what he's been doing. But the others are saying, regardless of that, you know, you can protest, you can come out like a lot of these folks. Look, if they're standing over there, at times you can hear them chanting, but there's no violence. And I suppose that's the point you're trying to make, Susan, is you can come out here and, you know, you could protest, and you could make your viewpoint known as loud as you can. As some folks say they've lost their voice because they've just been chanting all day. Certainly you can do that, but when it comes to crossing the line physically with police, with law enforcement, smashing windows, you know, vandalism and loitering, everybody seems to just have no tolerance for that. Yeah, exactly, very much. So yeah, throwing fireworks, throwing other projectiles at them. So we've seen in the LA downtown pieces of concrete. Yes, I know. Can you imagine? So that is the concern.
And as we look at your picture here, I would say also, having watched what happened in L.A. could have given Orange County much more advance notice as to what was going on in Southern California and the issues affecting members of the community, allowing them to perhaps get in place. Yet, as LAPD talked about, it takes time to mobilize a lot of units and to prepare for a mass crowd. Also, you don't have the massive amount of people that you had in downtown LA, but you also had a pretty quick response from not only Santa Ana PD, but also the Orange County Sheriff's Department. They were both in place last night.
And Lascos, thank you very much.
Yeah, and the other, you know, they had mutual aid, so you had...
Sorry for interrupting.
No, I was going to say, I'm sorry, Susan.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yes. The Argentinian president is in Israel. He's saying the Israel's victory is a victory for the whole world. He's a true friend of Israel. He understands reality. He understands the reality. It's sad. Enough.
There to wash his car. His 15-year-old son, Brian Vasquez, admits his father is undocumented. He says when ICE agents showed up at the car wash, his father panicked and tried to leave, but agents stopped him and took him into custody.
It was normal people working their jobs, trying to provide for their own families to push to have a better life. All I want right now is my dad here home.
Arturo Vasquez worked 2 jobs to support his family. Friends have set up a GoFundMe account to help his wife and kids, and also to try to hire an attorney to help their father. If you would like to help, we'll have the details on our website. Now, today, the family also learned that Arturo Vasquez has already been transferred to a facility in Texas. And that is the impact that, these ICE raids have on many of the families who also claim that they have no due process. In this specific case, he didn't work at the car wash. The agents were there to do a raid at that specific car wash. He happened to be there with his family to wash his car. And when the agents arrived, he panicked. He tried to get away, and of course he was stopped and taken in.
Gina, to the best of your knowledge, Arturo Vasquez, does he have any kind of a police record?
We don't know if he does or not. The family has stated before that he does not, that he was working 2 jobs. He apparently worked at Earth Cafe, was one of his employers, and they say he was just a hardworking man who supported his family by working those 2 jobs. He'd been trying to get legalized, but they talked about how it's been incredibly difficult and there was no pathway. It's what I was told.
Well, you mentioned Earth Cafe. That is a very popular restaurant, I'll say chain, but it was family founded, and I believe Pasadena might be their first location. Many of us have gone to Earth Cafe, know Earth Cafe very well. That's just a reminder, Gina, of how this is going to play out, where employers will be affected, customers will know people.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We went by the car wash to try to get a little bit of video and perhaps speak with someone there. It was closed. There was nobody there. And that's what we're hearing from folks, that if you go to certain groceries, there won't be anyone there, not like the usual traffic, because people are afraid. Brian, the 15-year-old we spoke with, says that he's afraid. He's a U.S. citizen, but he says that now I will be carrying my passport and a couple of extra IDs because I'm afraid that I could get picked up. So there's just a lot of fear in the community, of what's going on. A lot of folks saying, look, the initial statement was that we're going to go after hardcore criminals, people with criminal records. But the stories we're hearing from many families is that their loved ones didn't have a record.
Yeah.
Well, I know from people that I know that they don't have the criminal record in the sense that you and I think of a crime committed, but I personally know of somebody who had been removed from the country, sent back, and returned back, so he's considered a criminal because he violated the law in coming back to the country. Who knows the story here, but I think that it's an example of the true emotion that we are seeing and going to be seeing with families that are hit so directly by this.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we're seeing so many protests all over the country. People are protesting what they call unfair, unjust. Many were very much on board with getting the criminals, the people with the violent criminal records out of the country. They certainly, many were not on board with breaking up families and doing this kind of thing. Unfortunately, with some of the protests that we've seen, the violence and the agitators who come in and destroy. If you look at this building, it is just heartbreaking to see all of the graffiti, the horrible things that are written on here about police officers, about just awful stuff. And of course, that isn't helping, as the mayor said,
I
that is not
understand
helping the
why,
immigrant community,
but-
because that obviously gives, you know, the other side who do want complete, mass deportations, no matter what the story may be. It gives them ammunition to say, look at all the destruction that these, people are causing. But again, as the mayor has said, and many other officials have said, the protesters, many of them are very peaceful. They're out there marching, talking about what's unjust, and then, unfortunately, there's another element that comes in and causes so much destruction.
You might need
Fox
to
11's
step in,
Gina
Trump,
Silva
and
reporting live from Los Angeles as it's time
I'm
for
not
us
sure if your
here on Live
original
Now
decision is
to
correct.
step away for a brief commercial break. We still have lots and lots of live feeds coming in. A lot more to show you when we
You
return.
want to fix the immigration system, fix it, but yeah, it's just a piece of land, you didn't create it, it's not owned by people. I understand the open borders is not possible, but still. You can't look the other way for decades or century, and then one day decide to do something about it. Why not? You can just decide one day to do something about it. It's not ethical. Because for so many years you do it the other way. And you benefited from it also, So from what this country is built in, there's an ethic issue here. And these people are pissed, man, because they need to pay $50 for a McDonald's sandwich. It's $18 for a pack of cigarettes or whatever. And not even talking about rent. These people are paying rent so much money every month. Moving the American economy is ridiculous. Overpriced rent. Affordable rent doesn't really exist anymore.
Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. We're continuing to follow Los Angeles. Live feeds coming in from the ground. A live look at police helicopters as they monitor the developing situation in downtown LA. Curfew going into effect at 8 p.m. Pacific time. It will remain in effect until 6 a.m. for a small portion of Los Angeles, mostly encompassing the downtown LA area. Those familiar with the major freeways in the City of Angels, this is where the curfew will be in effect, again, until 6 a.m. local time. As we continue on, looking at live pictures from both there in the sky and on the ground. I'm curious if we can hear anything. Let's pull the audio up. Just a reminder, LA Mayor Karen Bass announced that curfew earlier today. The only exceptions, they say, are people who are traveling to and from work, credentialed media. If there's any medical situations, there's only a few exceptions for the curfew. By the way, those are the exceptions right there. Emergency and medical personnel, residents, workers, and credentialed media. They say that 23 businesses were looted last night. That was the tipping point that led to the curfew being implemented. They say that this measure is necessary in order to safeguard people and property after several days of what LA officials are calling concerning escalation. They say anybody in the curfew zone will be arrested. Anyone who assaults officers will be arrested. The curfew comes after 197 arrests at least were made today. LA Mayor Karen Bass saying that she doesn't know how long the ICE raids will continue in Southern California, but she says the cessation of those raids is the only way she hopes to end these protests immediately. Most of the protests in Los Angeles proper have been limited to 5 streets in the downtown area. We've also seen activity in Compton and Paramount, California as well. This is a main feature we've seen at so many of these protests. Mexican flags being supported by those who show up to these events. We've also got these live looks. That's CHP right there. So this is California Highway Patrol officers, likely nearby the 101 freeway, which is where we've seen a lot of activity in recent days. In some instances, we've seen the 101 freeway being shut down. And now we're seeing some of these protesters making their way into the intersection. We don't have an exact cross street on where this is, but Fox 11 Los Angeles is still on with their newscast. They're covering this exact scene. Let's listen in.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. So the curfew started at 8 o'clock. It's almost 8:45 p.m. My history tells me that LAPD gives you a little time to make your way out of there. How much time are we talking about?
Well, absolutely. It's going to be, especially for the first night, it's a reasonable standard issue. We understand it's new for everybody. It's a pretty early time slot as well for 8 p.m. So it's generally going to be officers going out, ensuring that people are, safely going to their premises. If there's anybody out there, look, you're overseeing it. You're kind of looking at what the situation is. You have families going home, people from the workplace, from other places. So you're really going to be the first, especially for the first night. It's a very reasonable standard, and just kind of advising people what to do.
So that's why we're seeing the LAPD with the heavy presence there, but not taking a huge amount of action just yet.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming you've worked these kinds of scenarios. What kind of reaction have you seen from the public in the past?
Quite honestly, there's a lot of positive sentiment as well. A lot of good people out there, community members, they're worried about their safety. And they like the fact that they're going to be officers there overseeing their communities, because it's a really difficult time sometimes. These are the issues that the bad folks take advantage of, especially at nighttime. Because they know officers are going to be in different parts of the city, some neighborhoods are not going to be well protected because you have so many officers getting diverted to one section of town or 2 locations and hotspots. People take advantage of that. So quite honestly, in my experience, when we're on patrol and going through these neighborhoods, people have a very positive effect and very supportive of their officers.
So whether you're looking at a curfew or demonstrators or random people in the streets, your life will be affected. So I just talked to a business owner who said, yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a curfew or too many protesters downtown or bad actors, the looters and those that were in a destructive point of mind. It's not helpful to anyone. So whether you're a resident downtown or a business downtown, any one of those scenarios is bad for them. So as far as the curfew is concerned, it means no one can come into downtown to patronize their businesses. But on the other hand, a lot of people were canceling anyway because of the fact they didn't want to run into roadblocks and people in the streets, causing mayhem. So at one point, how long can this kind of ordered curfew go before those residents and businesses say, enough, we got to get back to normal?
Yes, and that's a great question. And that's something that you look at. You don't want this to lengthen in time. You want this to happen for maybe a day, 2 days, 3 at the most. And you want the normalcy to go back. Obviously, people are nervous about it. They're fearful about it. You want normalcy. And I think the best situation now is for the police, LAPD specifically, continue communicating with their community. Let the stakeholders, let the schools, let these businesses know what we're doing. Transparency is key. And we want to ensure that we are partners with them. That's what they're going to do now. They want to make sure that, hey, we want to get you guys back to normal, but we also want to make sure everybody is safe, family, business, and the community as a whole. So I think the more communication, the more transparency you're going to be seeing, a lot more outreach. That's really an effective strategy to get this back to where we should be.
What do you say to critics who might have been watching this over the days saying, why did it take this long? Too much damage has been done. Protesters have had too much free reign, and I mean those who've been the bad actors already, and that it's a late response in their eyes.
Right, and look, as a layperson, I can understand that. As an officer going through the ranks, I can understand that. But command staff, it's politically charged as well. You don't want to come in as a command staff heavy-handed immediately and putting in that situation where police are overrunning a protest or overrunning anything else, because now it seems like the police are inserting themselves and becoming that authority that is overextending. And you don't want that to come out to be that way where the police are against the community. That's why you'll see this going a little bit slower, because you want to respect the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. But once it turns from that to what we're seeing now in certain pockets and certain times where it's a legitimate riot on our hands, then it changes. And then the action, it's really more reactivity, because if you're very proactive initially and do it so quickly, now you're the bad guy and now you're infringing on people's rights. And that's the problem that they don't want to have.
Yeah, the line in the sand seems to be the 23 businesses that were looted and damaged overnight. Now, let me ask you, in terms of the curfew zone, it seems really extensive for those people who know really where most of the protesters have been, that it's a rather small portion of that giant, well, it's only 1 square mile, but of that, the curfew zone is bordered by all those freeways, which the mayor said was on purpose because of the way we, as people who live in LA and Southern California, how we understand the geography, if you will, of the city. But do you think it could have been smaller in order to not affect business in, say, Chinatown or nearer to crypto.com?
You know, as a matter of fact, my wife and I were at Crypto just last night, and what a difference it would make, right? I think that's all part of the equation. Look, how big, how small, anything you do is going to be criticized, right? And I know they don't want to extend it too much out. You want to start smaller and expand if you need to, just to limit that problematic situations you're going to have. And you hit it right on the head. It's the 110, it's the 10, it's the 5, it's all these freeways that are going to be affected, because that's where the problems are happening, right? These folks are getting on the freeways, are creating that damage. More problems can occur, people getting run over or get struck. That's what you're trying to limit. So yes, you're trying to balance between providing that safety and also not affecting the community overall in such a stringent way.
Not sure if you're seeing our live pictures here on Fox 11. So the picture with the white bus, that is that bus that they will transport people who've been arrested or detained. On the picture on your right, we've seen at least 3 people putting those zip ties right there. They seem to be willingly going there, or perhaps they got boxed in and sorry, too late. The curfew's well underway, and you got caught up in the zone that is a curfew zone. But tell me what you think if you're seeing these pictures, officer.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now in a few minutes here. But quite honestly, in that situation, and again, the officers are going to be in that same mold as well, where let's try to find out what we have first. Who are these people? Is this a family? Are these people just going back from another location? They're not part of any type of melee or problematic issue. So that's what the officers will always err on the side of caution, to make sure that we're not going in an overly aggressive manner to handle what's happening, because there's a high risk of fear right now for a lot of people. And when that happens, it becomes more problematic to communicate properly of what's going on. So I think at this time what the officers are doing is just ensuring that whoever's in the area are being advised and making sure there's nothing in those vehicles that's going to become a problem for them, and making sure these folks are going home in a rather safe manner.
Yep. We are watching more LAPD officers move into space there, and we also saw the mounted units making a move there as well. You know, it's been a tough time, let's just say that, also for local law enforcement. How many of us know somebody who has dedicated themselves to serving the city as a police officer to deal with these crowds? But fair to speak also, this is a Tuesday night. You don't have the crowds that you saw on a Saturday and a Sunday. And also, Chief Jim McDonald said sometimes it takes 2 to 3 days before the protests ramp up to their full height. That would have been Sunday, give or take, Monday spillover. You don't have the crowds that we had before, meaning LAPD isn't outnumbered tonight.
Absolutely. I think, yes, you're right. The issues are the first night you're kind of getting caught off guard potentially based on what's happening. But as the nights continue, now you're gathering the resources, you're getting all the allocated officers that you need, and now you're making sure you're ensuring that those hot spots, if you will, are going to be handled. And again, the numbers are big for us, right? We have to have the right numbers, so at least we're trying to make sure that it stays peaceful, or if there's riots starting or civil unrest starting, we immediately identify which persons are doing that to incite this, and immediately make the detention or the arrest or remove that person from that crowd, so now the crowd can minimize or at least go back to a peaceful standard rather than getting incited by it.
I'm curious whether or not you can speak to what we've been watching the last couple of minutes, where we saw a line of officers sort of jogging towards an intersection and then kept going. Whether they're just en route to another location, they've been ordered to move, or whether that somehow is effective in kind of getting the message across. You need to get out all the people that are downtown who don't deserve to be downtown.
Yeah, what happens on those, again, I'm not there right now, I'm not listening to the radio, but what happens in those cases is you'll get on the radio, there'll be another flare-up. You'll start getting issues where somebody's throwing rocks and bottles or creating some kind of major issue. So where the officers are at currently, they'll have to minimize the presence there and respond to the next location so they can diffuse any problems coming up. So there's a lot of communication going on. We have our officers out there that are in plain clothes as well, that are monitoring these things and can hear and see things. So before it actually acts up, they can see and hear what's going on and relay that to the uniformed officers so we can get there and be proactive about it, and this time make sure that it does not start becoming a problem.
Absolutely. It's interesting to see, though, that there were a couple of people on scooters. They seem to be taunting officers, and that they're kind of riding around in front of the officers as the skirmish line moves. And of course they're filming, and I'm wondering, filming on their phones, and I'm wondering how cell phones and social media and all the streaming that you can do now, how that's changed the equation, if at all.
Well, that's a great question, and that really has. I think people see so much of it live right then and there. There's no longer people going out to the news at night at 11 to see what's going on. They're seeing it as if, like I am right now with you watching it. And because of that, that's going to bring in people to the area that want to create a problem. It's one thing they're going to protest during the day and what have you, but this is the nighttime, and this changes. And we know that as officers, the daytime versus nighttime really changes. And a lot of these folks is what they're doing. They're trying to get on the streaming. They want to get the likes, and they want to bring the people over to create these problems. And yes, it's a huge problem for LAPD. But one good thing is we also have logistics there too. Officers do monitor these sites. They know who they are. So I think they're also getting the information on where and when things are happening as well.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Chief Jim McDonald had said that there are a lot of videos out there and that they had made arrests, over 100 today alone. And he said more are coming. So there's the pro and con of people documenting themselves, doing whatever they're doing. But I think as people are watching this, they're thinking, but are you arresting the rioters? Are you arresting the people who did the damage? Are you arresting the people who did the spray painting at this hour?
Yeah, there was an older, like middle-aged man or older that just seemed like he happened to be there. He doesn't look like he was going to go loot, the Apple store. I mean, I can't say that 100%, but yeah, there's a whole mix of people in this group of people that have decided to hang around.
Right, but just to answer that, a lot of times you might not see on video, but if the officers, let's say if there are undercover other officers that observed him doing something or her doing something prior, we didn't see on what you're seeing on your telecast right now, they can advise the officers that's the person we're looking for. 3-4 minutes ago, he did this, this, and this. So a lot of times you'll see a detention being made, but not necessarily you didn't see the action that was precluding it.
Yeah, indeed. Deacon
Malconian,
thank you for your perspective. We really appreciate your great insight on what's going on, because, of course, we're not down there and we're just watching from Skyfox. So, again, at this point, we're going to take a break and come back with LA Live News tonight at 9 o'clock. Stay with us.
LA's home for LAFC is Fox 11 Plus ACOP.
1 minute you're driving along, enjoying your life, and
So one thing we like to do is we like to dip in to Fox 11 Los Angeles whenever their coverage is available. One thing that we're going to be doing in the upcoming hour is we're going to stick with them. We're also going to be monitoring the curfew order, as they've been discussing there on Fox 11. We're in the middle of the curfew right now. It started just under an hour ago, Pacific Standard Time. It runs until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's the curfew zone right there. Caleb, if we're able to, can we full screen the graphic portion of this? They say that the curfew applies to everyone who's out and about within this region. Residents are going to be, and you know what? There's a few populations of people who can stay out. That's people who are either working in the area, that's people who are living in the area. Accredited journalists may be out and about, but for the most part, what authorities have warned is that anybody who is in these areas during the curfew will be arrested. They didn't say may be arrested, they said will be arrested. 23 businesses were looted last night. They say that was the tipping point that led to the curfew being implemented. There's been a concerning level of escalation, evening by evening, according to the Los Angeles Police Department. 197 arrests were made today, at least. That was just at the time that they gave the news conference earlier today. They said 197 by earlier this afternoon. So I would be curious to know by sunup how many people end up being arrested because of this curfew. Because we have seen a number of people who did not abide by the curfew. Got this chopper image showing the police response in the area. We've watched as the line of police have moved closer to the protesters, pushing them back for the most part. Let's get the shot back on the ground again. I'm curious if we can hear anything. It has been relatively quieter. I will say this. It's been relatively quieter. There has not been as much shouting. There has not been as much. There hasn't been as much of a combative nature, I'll say. That isn't to say that it's been completely perfect out there tonight, but it was just 2 nights ago that I was on the desk and it was nonstop. Protesters getting in the faces of police officers. We've been watching all evening to see if there would be similar activity tonight. But largely what's happened is we've seen protesters take to the streets. And then it looks like that's a line of people who have been detained. So again, I'll be waiting for numbers either later tonight or early tomorrow morning to indicate just how many people were arrested because of the curfew tonight. You know what? Fox 11 is back on with their live news. Let's dip back into them. Again, this is their 9 p.m. news amid the curfew.
Enter their 5th night. Nearly 5,000 federal troops, including National Guard and Marines, have been deployed by President Trump, originally sent to protect federal buildings. They're now assisting with immigration arrests. Governor Gavin Newsom criticized the move tonight, saying it unfairly targets workers and sets a dangerous precedent by deploying the state's National Guard without his approval. Protests erupted downtown today, with demonstrators shutting down the 101 freeway. In response, Mayor Karen Bass issued a curfew in downtown L.A. until 6 a.m. tomorrow, and the LAPD reports arrests after protesters ignored dispersal orders. Now, the curfew is in effect until 6 a.m. It started at 8 p.m., and that was due to the night's unrest last night, where there was a lot of looting, damage, and it was just awful. 23 businesses. Now, the curfew started at 8, so we're about an hour into it. Covers about 1 square mile of downtown Los Angeles. It's bordered by the 5, the 110, and the 10 freeways. Now, officials hope the curfew will restore order while allowing peaceful demonstrations to continue. Fox 11's Laura Diaz is live downtown with us for the very latest. And Laura, you were at that vigil earlier this evening, and now where are you?
We're in front of the detention center, and that's where people who were at the vigil elected to walk from Grand Park over here to the detention center on LA Street. And of course, this is an area that we've been seeing often over the last 5 days as the unrest has developed, as the ICE raids came first and then people started protesting, and in some cases, you know, it devolved into something else. So here at the detention center, I'm going to step out of the picture. We've been watching as people are carefully checked to see if they have a right to be here. In fact, we know the only ones who are allowed to be here after 8 o'clock are media. So a few people who I believe thought that they would be able to stay, but once their ID was checked and authorities here determined that they did not have valid ID, that they were not members of the press, then they were indeed handcuffed, and we are told that they will be put into that LAPD bus that you see off to the left, and they will be booked. They were ordered to disperse. We all knew that after 8 o'clock, had to get out of the area, only media allowed to stay. So that's the scene here. But earlier today, it was a much different scene when we were at Grand Park. Let's listen to what people had to say there, including a very prominent priest here in Southern California. Let's listen.
We want to support the families. So here they're talking about, families are sacred, and so we want to underscore that, and we want to resist, the lies really about Los Angeles that somehow the chaos requires National Guard and the Marines, which of course is not true.
That was Father Greg Boyle talking. He was one of the many people who spoke today. We also heard from a rabbi, and she had poignant words as well. And we heard from community leaders and Mayor Bass. Basically, the message was said in different ways by different people: stay together. You have a message you want to get out to the world. Do it peacefully. Show the world that Los Angeles is a peaceful place, that we are a place where we support neighbors and we support the cause of people who've come over to this country and work hard and deserve the right to stay. She said, as did many others, that if people have broken the law, if they've broken the law to get into this country and they've come here and they've committed horrible crimes, then of course they have to pay for those crimes. But they wanted to support the people who've been in this country for many years, who pay taxes and work hard. So that was the sentiment that we heard over and over again. I think there were about 500 people in Grand Park. I would say about half of them made the trek over here to the detention center. And then, it was about 7:45 when everybody arrived here, and then at 8 o'clock it was time to go. When I looked around, and my cameraman felt the same as I, we looked around and we felt that the people who had been at that prayer vigil, most of them left at 8 o'clock because they knew it was time to go. The other people who hung back were some of the ones that we recognized from last night, who then got involved in activity that was very harmful to property and to people. So we do see people coming around. They're not part of the group that has something they want to express in a peaceful manner and support their neighbors. Coming back live here, though, in front of the detention center, you can see that there is a large presence by LAPD. Earlier, they were the mounted police. Here we have officers that are booking those who elected to stay after the 8 o'clock curfew. And I will say that when we were asked to move back, we were asked to move in the most aggressive manner that we've been told since I've been covering this story over the last 5 days. We had to move back quickly. I think I was in the middle of a live shot when that happened, and they pushed us back quite a few feet from where we were before, because they were going to begin the process of trying to determine who was here that deserved to be here, and the only one who's allowed to be here after 8, if you don't live in this area, are the media. So those people are being arrested and they will be taken away. So it's peaceful here now, but there's a large police presence. Also, the guard was here earlier. I don't see them now, ensuring that things are quiet in this spot in downtown LA. Susan?
And what we're not seeing, Laura, we're not seeing anyone lob water bottles or worse, fireworks at police. Nothing like that tonight.
No, obviously the area is secured, so we won't see any of that tonight. At least from my vantage point, I'm able to see almost all the way to the freeway and then down the street. But when the LAPD moved in, they moved in quickly and they moved in with conviction. As people like to say, they weren't playing. I mean, we knew to get out of the way fast. So that's what we're seeing right now. Just those people being booked. They're being lined up along that gate there, and presumably they'll be taken away in that bus and I guess perhaps spend the night in jail. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think you'd be released OR. I think probably people will spend the night in jail. But this is the scene in downtown, and I assume that it's quiet in other parts of the city as well. This is the only place I've been today. But a story I told to you earlier that I thought was quite fascinating. After we finished our live coverage last night and I got back to my destination at 7th and Olive, I saw, we weren't that far away. We were, 7 blocks from where all that lawlessness had taken place. All the vandalism and people hurting other people. And people at 7th and Olive were out on dates, Susan. I saw couples walking by holding hands, walking down the street to go have dinner, and other people walking up to the taco truck. And trust me, they didn't have a clue what was going on not far from where they were. So that's the difficulty of it. If you own a business and you're thinking, come on, I'm not close to where that activity is taking place, why can't I stay open? But, the mayor and the chief of police have to do what's best for the people of the city to keep them safe. And they have determined that having this curfew is what's safe for people. And we have to trust them. We elected them into office, and it's their decision to make.
Good point, Laura Diaz. Thank you. Indeed, because it is a huge, square mile of the curfew zone. And as she pointed out, you could be not that far away when things are happening, and yet you don't see any of this kind of thing that we've been focusing on the last 5 nights. All right, let me show you this. Crowds protesting the anti-immigration raids marched onto the 101 freeway in downtown Los Angeles earlier today. The CHP mobilized quickly to move protesters out of freeway lanes. The confrontation shut down traffic briefly, but it's moving again tonight. And last we saw, there were definitely law enforcement officers at on-ramps on locations where protesters could access the freeway. All right, we're going to go to meteorologist Adam Kruger.
Yep.
It's kind of like a amuse-bouche. It's kind of a way to clear the palate and enjoy some good news about our weather.
A palate cleanser. And that is how the LA news market works. You got to get the weather. You got to get some of the breaking news in. We wanted to make sure we got you some of the breaking news elements to their coverage. As they do their weather forecast, we're going to take the opportunity to slide away for a brief commercial break. We do still have vantage points from the ground here. As they've been alluding to in their reports from the scene, though, a lot quieter tonight than previous nights, as is indicative by this vantage point in downtown LA. Let's take a commercial break. We're going to bring you back down to Los Angeles in a moment. So welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. This is the one scene we've got from the ground for now. We've been seeing a number of people being detained. It is a quieter night. As I mentioned before the break, we've seen a number of people being arrested. We know the LAPD pulled up this bus in the shot here. That is a Department of Corrections bus. Presumably, the number of people or the group of people that are detained or arrested tonight, they'll use this bus or buses to process people. I haven't been able to count exactly how many people I've seen, but there's been a steady stream of people being led away in those zip tie handcuffs. This is an area of downtown Los Angeles that's within the curfew zone, which again, for anybody who's familiar,